The thing you liked best, the thing you liked least about Apple's quarter?
Well, they didn't guide down, and I was, along with a lot of investors, expecting that they would guide the June quarter slightly below analyst expectations. That's because there was a lot of negative chatter from the supply chain about iPhone demand. So the thing that I like best is they maintained what the iPhone numbers were. They actually guided up slightly for the June quarter, which was a surprise. The second big part of the quarter was the services business, up 31% year over year. Services now accounts for 15% of the revenue. So I want to put those two together and talk about why that's the most important surprise from last night, is that collectively, that's 75% of Apple's business. And what we're seeing is more stability and predictability in the iPhone business, and then obviously the strength and the growth in services. And what you are left with is high visibility in 3/4 of Apple's business. This is a very different visibility business than we had several years ago. So those are my two surprises. And if I can indulge you for one more, on the buyback, I think that's a critical part to this story longer term. Not a big surprise last night, but the buyback's an important part of the story.
Yeah, $100 billion extra is pretty impressive, Gene. I think it's fair to say. Now, forgive me, you're going to laugh at this question even. Are you concerned at all about margin compression? I mean, given the margins they have, they're pretty extraordinary. But at the same time, their average selling price, is it really going to be increasingly under pressure as they increasingly bring out cheaper and cheaper iPhones to really maintain their position?
They did guide margins fractionally below a couple points, like 0.2% below where the street was for the June quarter. But I'm not concerned about margins because I actually think that the average selling prices of phones are going to inch higher. And they gave a little indication that that might happen on the call last night when they talked about the strength of the iPhone X. That's the most popular and also the most expensive iPhone. Typically, in the out quarter, so the second quarter after a product is released, the most expensive product tends to be the second most popular product. But since the iPhone X is still the most popular, that's a sign that Apple has a license to come out with more expensive products. And that's another part of the story here. Of course, investors are hyper-focused on what's coming out in the future, and we think in the fall they're going to have a more expensive even larger screen phone. This could be a $1,400 phone. So, David, to put it all together, is we're not concerned about margins. We actually think that they're going to be inching ASPs higher.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, Gene. We just put up a graphic while you were talking. You didn't get to see it about the expansion of the number of iPhones over the years. And in another business, you'd be worried about cannibalization or dilution or something like that. But it seems to be working for them. They just keep adding more and more models. Why is that working for them?
Well, it's an intensely loyal base. There's about 800 million active iPhone users. And the reason the model works is that they have a great product that people want to buy again. The typical renewal rates is about 93%. So for sure the most sticky iPhone in terms of commitment to that. So what they do is they continue to mine this base of users and find different ways to sell to them. So, and of course that is the services part. I want to just really impress upon what this means about this base is I think we're entering a new phase around the iPhone story, and that is going to be a phase of greater predictability, so we're not going to have to sweat each quarter. And separately, I think it's going to be lower growth, so kind of a 0 to 5% growth. And that is because they have this large 800 million base they just keep mining with a broad line of products.
So does that mean that the stock has re-rated to like a non-super cycle, more visible, potentially Apple as a value name story?
We're not there yet. It's still considered a tech name, and tech investors love growth. But I think that there's going to be a slow shift over the next several years where, I mean, there's still going to be anxiety around an iPhone. But if that anxiety would scale between a 1 and 100, I think it's just going to get slower and tighter and tighter. So to answer your question, Alex, is I think we are ushering into a new phase of how investors think about the Apple story. I think it's going to be less stressful. I think people are going to value the buyback more. I think this should be good for the multiple.
So, Gene, let me turn you to a different kind of tech company, Tesla. They're going to have their earnings out after the bell this afternoon. What are you expecting out of Tesla?
So I love the Tesla story. I think it's one of the most transformative opportunities in tech over the next decade. Just want to remind people quickly what their mission statement is, which it plays into what's going to happen tonight. It's to accelerate the globe's adoption of renewable energy. It's not to make a great car. But tonight, it's going to be about Elon Musk reassuring investors that he can, in fact, scale Model 3 production. Now, he had this internal, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, email that was leaked a few weeks ago where he basically mapped out how they can go from 1 to 2 to 5,000 vehicles, Model 3s per week by the end of June. And I think he's going to elaborate on that in the call tonight. And I think that's what investors are going to be laser focused on.
Is Tesla an investment right now or a religious experience? Because I mean, he's missed just about every projection he's made so far. In another kind of regular old company, investors would have gotten a little skeptical.
I'm not quite there. I understand the religious experience perspective. I think what it is there is it is a as fun as it gets for someone who's an analyst who's covering the space, because there are two very strong arguments that are very different. One argument is that this company is going to go out of business. The other argument is that it's going to the moon. And so, and I think that they're both solid arguments on both sides. Is it a religious experience? I think that there are some very avid believers that believe that he can, in fact, scale Model 3 production. Yesterday, I was in a Chevy Volt. It was in a Lyft, and it was a Chevy Volt. It was $38,000 he paid for that car. I can tell you that the Model 3 is a substantially better vehicle than the Chevy Volt, and for essentially the same price. I think more people have viewed Tesla as a religious experience once they get into these Model 3s.
So, Gene, I just want to drill down for a second on those Model 3s. What's your expectation short term for their production and for how many reservations there still are for the car?
So the short-term production, they did, as I mentioned, 1,000 in the December quarter. They did about 2,000. They already announced that per week. They exited at about 2,000. We're expecting it to be 4,000. Now, Elon Musk talked about a 6,000 number exiting June, but that was their target. They're still, it was confusing, but the bottom line is they could be as high as 5,000 for the June quarter. So that's the target. As far as the reservations, they stopped giving out those numbers. Most likely, it's somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000. The reason why that's important is this has never happened before, where you have a new car that's come out, where you have this massive interest in buying it when they can't produce them. And so it is very analogous to what happened when the iPhone came out, when you couldn't get a hold of them. It's just a much different price point.